All right, so we're going to talk about how to set up this file, which is a traditional drawing, right? This is traditional. You drew this with paper and pencil?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're taking a traditional drawing and we're going to color it like an architectural rendering. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because it would take up, the whole class, but I'm just going to show you how to set the file up. So I just filled up another image that I'm going to kind of take that lighting from. And it's got this, the image I'm working with has this, I'll get my magenta marker. It's got this big wall here that's kind of like facing the camera. And this image kind of has a similar setup in terms of lighting. So I'll kind of know how to apply this lighting and color to this image here. So first, let's see. You open up your drawing in Photoshop, and we got to make sure we have enough space to work with. So I'm going to go to image size, and right now it's at 150 pixels per inch. It's 4 inches, but all you really need to look at is the pixel dimensions. It's 730. For the sake of this demo, I'm going to turn this to 72, and I'm going to boost these pixels up to 2500. But if you're working, I'm only doing that because I don't want it to slow down the computer, but I would normally take it up to like 4000. Yeah. Barrett, is it okay if I email on the phone?
Sure.
Okay. Let me email y'all real quick. Let me close. I don't want that to be on the internet. My inbox. Let's forward this. Give it a moment. Give it a moment. There we go. Sorry. And the attachment should be on there. Okay, so you'll get that shortly. I'm going to go and keep running through the setup. All right. If I weren't working with this screen capture, I would boost it up to 4000 pixels. But just for the sake of saving my hard drives, and I'm going to take the biggest dimension is going to be 2500. And that's just going to allow me to have more space to work with. Now the lines are a little blurry, but Barrett, since you're drawing, if you're doing this at home, just scan it at like 600 DPI, like a really high DPI, and that way you'll have some crisp pencil lines to work with, right? But if in this case I can kind of doctor it a little bit to make it look a little sharper. Unsharp mask will help with that. What was that?
I don't know when's appropriate to ask. So I'll just start in. One of the things I'd be interested in hearing, maybe your technique is different, but I kind of rely on the strength of my line work sometimes.
Yeah.
But then somewhere in between wanting to show that off and also then trying to adjust the drawing to clean it up as the underdrawing for the painting.
Oh, okay, cleaning it up.
There's a process kind of getting there first, or later in the process.
I mean, yeah, the first thing you would do if there's something you're not happy with in your lines, you go back and clean it up, like right now. So I can come in here and just take white and kind of, maybe that wasn't what you wanted right there or something. I don't exactly know.
It's weird to see that you won't necessarily even see it
These
on the
dots.
page, but you'll get clouds, you'll mar the tooth of the page.
Yeah, I see a
Too much.
little bit up here. Oops. Hold on. It always acts funny when I do the screen capture. Zoom back in. Okay, stop. There's some up here in the corner. It's hard to see. If I boost the levels up, I can show you. Just to show you real quick. You'll see the top corner got really dark because that means there's information up there that I don't really want. So I'm just going to turn off that. I just wanted to show you what that looked like in case you can't see it on the projector. I'm just going to paint white over that. And a part of it, though, I mean, if you want it to look traditional, you'd want to keep whatever paper texture is there, right? If you want it to look like you did it by hand, like on paper with an actual watercolor set. But if it's not your concern, I won't worry about it. Sorry, my screen's dirty. I just realized that was not on there. Okay, so that's kind of, let me see, I'll turn that back on. There's still some stuff up here. So that all that levels is doing is just letting me see what's not pure white. Because all the stuff that's kind of hazy around the lines, that's just from where your hand must have smeared it in accident. And over here, the thing for me, it's not such a paper texture that it looks like you meant to leave it there. It looks like they're smeared graphite. So that's kind of what I'm taking out. And you can make it faster if we press L for the lasso tool and just cut out what we want instead of having to sit here and brush. I normally default, I work with the brush because I have more fun doing that, but it's not the most efficient. G, just okay, and there, filled it in with white. So I'm just cleaning up all that dead area. Okay, and the other thing, so I have remember I pulled this image up and I just put it in a new document. So all I did was I grabbed it online and opened it. But if you want to see this while you're working, which is what we want to do, I'm going to go ahead and just go up to Window, Arrange, and it's just 2 up horizontal or 2 up vertical, whatever your preference is. If you have 2 screens, you could throw it onto one screen, the other screen, but for the sake of this, I'll just have it, both of them right here. And on this window, I can scroll and just kind of adjust it where I want it. Generally, just want to see how the light looks. And over here, I'm going to turn off this layer. Close that. Okay, so the lines are a little light. So with that, I'm just going to duplicate the layer. Control click or right click your layer. Duplicate. It's going to say, what do you want to label it? Just click OK. And just set the top one to multiply. And it's going to darken everything underneath, right? And now I'm just going to adjust it a little bit so it's not so dark in the certain areas. Maybe like that. I'm just turning down the opacity. It's a little darker, right? And then if I want to, I can go to my layer, new adjustment layer, curves or levels, whichever one you want, and just bring up the darks a little bit more. This is running extraordinarily slow. Let me close everything else. There we go. Quit. Just quit. Quit. Okay, that's darks. And I don't want the darks to get too dark because it's gonna kind of be too muddy. So I can boost the lights a bit to give some more contrast, just a tad, like barely anything. And I'm just gonna mess with this to see what it looks like. Kind of like that. Okay. All right. So now I'm just gonna flatten everything, well, let's put it in a folder. Let's just edit non-destructively as much as we can. So I'm just gonna put this folder. I'm gonna name it lines. I click the icon below to activate the folder, and we'll just say lines, or lines. And now I'm just gonna put everything in here. Oh, that one's not letting me. I just double click it and it'll turn to a normal layer. Okay, so now that everything is in that folder. So now we're going to click on the folder icon, make a new layer. And I want to work underneath the lines layer. And I want to go ahead and, if I click the lines folder, this might not be in the older versions of Photoshop, but in CS6, I can come up here and it says pass through, and I could change it to multiply. So the whole folder, everything in the folder is now multiplying down, which means it's only going to darken. So if I go onto this new layer and I paint with like green, I can paint and I won't paint through the lines, right? It's going pretty slow. Let me just shrink this. I'm shrinking this down just for the purpose of saving the computer a bit. Don't work this low though if you're working for Barrett. If you're using this for like architecture stuff, work at like 4,000, maybe even 6,000, depending on how big it is.
DPI.
No, pixels. So DPI is how the pixels are displayed. But
Isn't it like pixel per inch?
yeah, so it's how many pixels are displayed per inch. All you need to worry about is just the amount of pixels. The DPI is just gonna, it's just basically asking you how much do you want to like,
Hard detail.
huh?
Like hard detail. How much?
Yeah, the density. That's what it is. It's the density. It's like a spoonful of sugar is always gonna be a spoonful of sugar, but if you cram it in a little bitty space, it's gonna be more dense and like a sugar cube, you know? Think of it kind of like that. So like this stuff is great if you're gonna print. Like if you're gonna print, always at least go up to 300. Or some places only want you to do a 150, but 300 is the big one if you really want a nice print. And but notice, so like, let me change it back to 72. So I switch it to 1600. If I switch my DPI down here, it's gonna boost it up to 6,000 pixels. So if you wanted to work at 22 inches at 300 DPI or 300 PPI is actually what it is, pixels per inch. It's going to work at 6,000. For the sake of this demo, it'll work at 1600. But if I want to work at 6,000, I could still just come up here and boost it to 6,000, and it'll, you know, it'll still be 72, but it's going to be the exact same file size. So that this number here is arbitrary compared to this number. So always work up here the pixels, and then when it comes time to like when I work on a client work, so I'll come in here and put 4,000. So I'm working at like 55 inches. If you imagine the piece of paper, it's like, you know, a big thing of paper. And then when it's time to print, oops, let's just change it to 1600. When it's time to print, I will switch it to 3,000. Let me cancel that because it's messing up all my. Yeah, okay, there it is. It's already at 600. Great, 1600. All right, so we've got all the lines set in a folder, set to multiply, and we've got this layer beneath. You got two options. The quickest way to do this, and we call it kind of like the cheater's way, only because it just really, really shortens your time, is just come over here and color pick. So like if this side is in the light, then this right here, oops, keeps, hold on. If this side right here is in the light, then that means these colors, let's say these brick colors here, will be the same as this wall that's facing the light, right? Because they're both facing the same direction, generally speaking. So this is one way to do it. You go in here and just paint in. I'd pick out like a brush that has a texture, so it kind of looks more, it could be a watercolor. But remember, you're not really working in watercolor. If you really want it to look like watercolor, you can go download a brush set, or you can make your own brush. It kind of looks like a watercolor brush. I think I showed you all that one.
Is there more of a preferred method, or how do you say it, emulator style, do buildings in cube/movie world? Because to me, I might emulate watercolor if I wanted it to look like a watercolor, but if it looks like a cheap watercolor, I'd rather just do the watercolor. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's it. What I'm saying is, if you really want to look like watercolor, there's ways to set your brush to look kind of like it's watercolor, but it'll, like right now, the watercolor settings for this brush allow me to make a stroke of color, and then when I apply more color, it darkens the color the way a watercolor would. You know, like if you have blue, it's, you know, it kind of like, it always kind of darkens the layer underneath. The issue is that you're working digitally, and you can get a traditional look, but if you're just working digitally to just complete the project, this isn't necessary unless you really, really want it to look like watercolor. You know, like if you really want that look. But it's going to have the attributes of watercolor with this brush, right? So you're basically making yourself work just as hard as you would with watercolor, except you can come back and erase, right? That's the only difference, is I can come in here and erase this, and you can't do that with watercolor. Or I can come in here and isolate. I can isolate just this part of the building, which I can't do in a watercolor paper unless I have tape. You know, if you actually tape the paper with the actual masking tape, you can kind of stop it from filling in. See, this watercolor brush taxes my system right now because I'm recording the screen, but I'm going to go ahead and just switch over to a regular brush. I'm going to switch to this one. I always use this one. It's like this big, you guys have it in the brush pack. It's got a soft edge and a hard edge. And hold on, all my opacity. Yeah, I'll set my opacity to on my brush to 70, so it'll only ever go 70% dark. And then I'm going to set my flow back up to 100. So this will kind of mimic a watercolor look because it's going to overlap. But I know it'll never go. Oh, it's already set to multiply still. Sorry, let me fix that. I just come in here and start painting. So it's going to have like that overlapping look, but it'll never go darker than the color I chose, right? And we'll just come in and paint everything. Now, because it's digital, the whole point you want to work in here is so you can come in here and do this. So you can speed up your process. Because you don't want to, there's no point working digitally if it's going to take you just as long as the watercolor process, right? I mean, you might as well just learn the watercolor process. So I'm going to come in here and select this with the lasso tool. You press L. It's a polygonal lasso. Or you can use the pen tool. But polygonal lasso would be good enough. And we're just going to isolate this shape. Any shapes that are facing this direction will have the same color. And it looks like there's some kind of tile up here or some kind of roof. So that's going to have a different color. That's just from my own, like it might not have looked that way when you drew it, but just me guessing is like what I'm going to add on. And this part I didn't want, so you remember you hold Option or Alt, and you can erase. Not erase, but you can deselect. Okay. So the other wall that's facing, this wall right here that I'm circling, that wall is also facing the same direction. So I'd want to come in here and select this. And this wall is going to kind of fade off, right, because the drawing kind of fades away. And I don't want to select that little step because that step's not facing the exact same direction I want it to. And I'll just loosely come in here and finish this. And we'll... No, you just hit L to activate the tool, and I'm just clicking with my pen as I will go. So now I've got two walls that are facing the same direction. I'll come up here and address this in a moment. But I'm just going to take my brush and just, because I don't want it to look entirely digital, like I could come in here with the paint bucket tool and just dump color by clicking. I'm just going to brush it in with just real quickly. But now I know that it's never going to go outside the bounds of my marquee tool, my marquees I set up. And it'll never go darker than the color I selected, so I don't have to worry about it going like, you know, the watercolor, the more you pile on, the darker it gets. The pigments can get pretty dark, but depending on which pigment you're using. But okay, here we go, right? And deselect, Control D or Command D, or you can go up to the menu and deselect right here. All right. Now the next walls. So if all the walls facing us are that color, and we're going to come in and put some variation into it. But then all the walls facing to the side, it's almost like a green color. Now the reason it's a green color is because the bricks have a yellow tint to them, and the sky is blue, and the sky is reflected in the shadows. So whenever you're doing any kind of landscape painting or any kind of building painting, the sky is always going to affect the shadows, because the shadows, what's happening is the sky is blue, so these surfaces are reflecting the sky back onto each other. And because you get blue and yellow, because we know that blue and yellow make green, the color we get here is a kind of green color. So that's always going to be true. And like, but if the sky looked real purple, we'd have these purple shadows, right? So general rule of thumb, and it's not always correct, but generally, if your sky has a certain color, or if your sky is a certain color, you can always color pick the sky and set this. Let me show you an example. Let me just go over here and do it. I'm going to pick the blue of the sky, and I'm going to come back to this document. I could just create a new layer, and then I go up to the menu and set it to multiply. And I can just paint with the blue, and it's going to get me generally that same green that I already picked earlier, because it's the same color. It's the sky is making the sky's not making it darker, but in Photoshop you can use that. You can use the sky color to create the shadows. I'm going to delete that. And then generally, as you go higher, the atmosphere will affect the building. But that's all stuff you'll learn if you actually go out to like a church or an abbey or a downtown building, and you spend a few hours painting with real watercolors. You'll start seeing the differences of the variation in light that a photograph can't capture. But for the purpose of the speed, we're just going to take the shadow color from this document. And there's some variation, so we're going to come back in here and add some variation in color, because you can see that the color keeps changing as I move up and down. We'll take this color here. And we're going to come back to this working document and create a layer, set it to multiply. The same thing for speeds, use the lasso, or else you're just, you're working digitally for no reason, right? And this is because, Barrett, I'm kind of talking to you this way because this is for like work, right? This would be long term. You'd use this for actual client work. So it's in your best interest, if it's a project rate, to work as fast as you can and get it done. If they're paying you hourly, I mean, you could just take your time, but theoretically, you want to charge a high hourly and be really fast, and then they understand why you're charging so much. They'd be like, "Oh, it's really high hourly, yeah, but it only takes 4 hours to do it." And it's like, "Oh, okay," and then that might be the thing. It's like you're the guy that's really fast, and that you charge a lot of money, but it's not a big deal when you look at the results. Okay. So any of the shadows you've drawn in, I'm going to just take that color and paint in. So like over here is all shadow with these lines. And in this area, we're going to put that shadow in. And over here, all this, we're going to put this in shadow. Because it's also the same. It's the same side. So anything that's facing that way is going to have this color. So all this. This is how I would work if it was a work project. Like, keep everything real separate. Make sure everything's really clean. Don't like destroy anything. Don't erase your lines. Don't what do you call it? Don't erase your lines, and don't put everything on one layer. Make everything easy for you to change. If like your client comes back and says, "Oh, this is not what I want," or like, "I really like what you did here, but can you change this one thing?" You can go back and find that layer and fix it, instead of having to go back and redo the whole image. Okay. I'm just going to take this color here and just put that on this side. It looks like this is kind of square, actually, now that I'm looking. I thought it was kind of round, so I didn't want to shade it the same way. But it looks kind of like the top's kind of like a rectangular. Okay. So now, let's see. Let's look at some of these windows here. I'm just going to come back to this image. For speed's sake, we're just going to color pick it. Now, if this was like a study, if you were practicing from this photo and you're trying to learn lighting from looking at this photo, because even from using this photo, we can see that, like when I color picked the shadows earlier, you saw that there was green in the shadows. So there's still things to be learned, but some photos are bad to study from. And the photo flattens everything out. So that's another thing, that you're not going to really see the 3 dimensions the way you need to. But I'm just going to take this really dark shadow and I'm going to apply that to all the windows. So right here, let me make a new layer. Layer, multiply, and let's label these. So this is fronts, sides, windows. Keep everything organized. So just come in with a dark color, paint in the windows. The more exact way would be to use the lasso tool, which I would recommend if that's what you're really going. Like these are windows here too, so I know I need to paint these in. Might be harder to see. I don't know. I think you can see it, yeah. Okay. And windows up here. So generally, let me think about this real quick. We gotta decide. So was the roof a certain color when you were here, or was it just all the same?
I believe it's half metal, half like the terracotta tile.
Okay, terracotta. So let's just kind of pick out.
Terracotta.
Let's just pick out like a kind of terracotta look. So it's like a burnt orange kind of, maybe a little less saturated. We use this color. And I'm going to add a new layer. Change it to multiply. We'll call this roof. Okay. And these are actually going to be the front of the roof, right? Because parts of the roof face forward and parts of the roof face to the side. So, actually, let me do it this way. Here's the other way to do it. The other way to do it is to select everything that's made of that same material. So if all the roofs are the same material, let's say all the roofs are terracotta, just for the sake of this. You select everything that is the roof. I gotta select this chunk behind, it's gonna be redundant. This is all roof. This too, this is roof here. Yeah. No, don't start Vox. And then let's just say this is roof. Perspective's off a bit, but oops. Thank you. Go back. This is my history menu. If you're wondering what I did, I went back into history because I just lost my selection. If that happens to you and you just spent like a long time selecting something, then just go back into your history. It's always like the last stage. Okay, what is this? And then the last bit of roof up here. All this here is roof. I think this is supposed to be like, there was like a slant here, so I feel like somehow the roof goes up that way. Might not be correct, but. Okay, so you select everything that's the same material. We click G, fill it in. Then you create new layer, set to multiply. And you take the blue that's from the sky we already talked about. We come back, and anything that's not facing the camera or facing us, the viewer, we're gonna shade. Now, I'm just gonna type roof shadow. If I just start painting here with the roof shadow set to multiply, it makes me go willy-nilly. So that's why we would want to select this layer, hold Option or Alt, and create the clipping mask we talked about before. This is the moment when you'd want that, because you're just trying to work efficiently and work fast. So now I'm only gonna paint in what I've already established would be the roof. Oops, God, it's acting up. Okay. Anything not facing forward. Bear with me real quick. This is really overreacting. I'm just gonna get really small in a second. Hold on. Anyway, so as it glitches out, let me just continue. You're going to paint anything that's not facing us with that blue color, and it's going to create the shadows we want. There we go. Now I can just undo all that mess, and if it doesn't happen right away, I can go to my history and fix it. There we go. All right. We just come in and shade in everything that's facing away. Okay. And if you want just, okay, the other thing is too, like I'm trying to just get a variation in what I'm doing. So I can set up my brush, like if I don't want to sit here and just scribble in, and I kind of know, I can set up my scattering and tell it to scatter just a little bit. And I can tell it to transfer. I can tell it to just kind of the jitter with the opacity a little bit. And then the shapes, I can get it to angle my shape just a little bit. This will tax my system a bit, but it's going to also, huh?
It becomes just kind of a feel thing for you. I mean, I guess it's important to recognize it's there, but it seems like every day there's a growing number of knobs to be able to.
For the brushes?
Yeah, just to get the right effect that you want.
It's whatever you want. So like, so.
You found what you like by playing, right? Or
Yeah, and lots of these brushes I just downloaded and I just like them. So I found them from other people's brush packs, you know.
tweak your setting much?
No, not at all. I'm tweaking it now because I'm trying to get a variation in the pattern. I'm trying to not make it look digital, so I'm scribbling in order to create a streaking look because you want to give it like a watercolor or just like someone spent time working on it. But if you don't want to literally spend all the time, I can.
Where's the mossy roof?
So I can erase this a bit. Now you saw me scribbling with it, but since I reset the settings, it's going to automatically give a little bit of a texture. You know, like that way it's not perfectly clean. Let me erase all this. This is all acting really strange too because of QuickTime. QuickTime's just going to affect it right now. So I can come in here and, because it's set to scatter and it's set to randomly, it's going to randomly adjust the opacity. It kind of just gives me a variation, and just makes it look a little less perfect, you know, like, but unless you want, you know, I'm not going to redo all that. Okay, there we you could want that, hold on, let me just find my brush again. There we go. You could want this, so like the strokes of the pen motion. Anyway, let's just keep going. Let me finish this up. I'm gonna go back down to the front. You doing it versus me now is, you know, you take more time. You know, just don't try and rush it in like 1 hour. You know, I would anticipate something like this would taking you like 4 to 6 hours. If you really got in the groove and you know what you're doing. And then if it's a bigger project, it would probably take you longer. And depending on how neat you want it to be, but part of the appeal of the watercolor is that there's kind of a looseness to the color. It isn't perfect, so like that would be a reason to be able to do it faster, is that you don't want it to look super perfect. So this glove I'm wearing allows me to slide my hand across the tablet without having it getting stuck. Because like my hand can get sweaty if I'm working for a while, and it'll kind of just, it'll make my cursor jerk across, and I don't want it to do that.
Help you moonwalk as well?
No, it doesn't even walk. But I have noticed that before I had it, it would be an issue if I was working for a while and then I was trying to like make a big line like that or something. You gotta like make sure like my hand's not like pressed too hard against it. Let's just finish this up. The one thing we didn't do is we didn't put in the sky, which you probably should have done. Why is that darkening? Oh, because I put these in the wrong. I got it. See, I put a front on the layer that said sides. I shouldn't have done that. Okay. Keep everything organized. Okay, so let's just finish this up a bit. So the grass in this original photo, like, it's got a variation of green colors, right? So I'm going to come back to mine, and I'm going to create a new layer, call it grass. Grass. Lasso tool again, same tool we've been using. It's just lasso tool on the brush over and over again. This place might not have had grass, but just for the sake of showing you how I'm pulling from the photo, I'm going to add in a color dynamic, and I'm going to I want the saturation to jitter a little bit, and I want the hue to jitter just a little bit. And I don't really know what purity does. I'm just going to change it a bit. And this should give me some variation in the green of the grass. A subtle variation. So I'm not painting with just one color. If I want to be absolutely sure, I can come back here and color pick a more rich green. Come back and just add in some random green. If I want to really make it look random, I can come in here and find a really messy brush, something like this. This is a bunch of, if I zoom out, you'll see it's a bunch of like specks. It's like a splatter, kind of. So I can just take this light green and just run it across, and it's just adding lighter green specks. Because I don't need to come in here and paint each individual grass blade. I just need to imply that the grass is there and that the grass looks slightly different. And I can manually add some, make it more green, darken it. I'm sorry, add the saturation, darken it a bit, and then I do it one more time. It's just adding some dark green specks now.
We talked about in a previous tutorial about, I forget how you called it, like photo splicing and utilizing some of that. I've tried to.
Oh, like the
study
photo
use,
bashing?
Like particularly for texture, if you're doing water, I might imagine grass, depending on how close in you are.
Yeah, that's
Is
something.
you do, or would that kind of conflict with the style that you're aiming for?
Oh, it depends on what you. So on this project, it would depend on what you want. So like if you're trying to go for a watercolor look, I would not advise using a photo texture. But if all you're trying to do is show a realistically rendered architectural scene for something, then I would recommend using photo textures. If it's all about selling the realism, then I would say you should use a photo texture. Let's see here. We had the one thing we didn't do. We didn't add the sky. Let me just put in sky, and notice that the sky, it goes from a lighter blue here, and just take a look at the little color thing here. The saturation is at 35. And when I go to the very top of the picture, the saturation is at 51. So the top sky up here is going to be more blue than the sky closer to the horizon. So I can save myself some time instead of having to like sit in here and paint in. Well, actually, I'm just going to use the lasso tool. So it's just pretty easy, honestly. We'll just select. Oops, not that. Select more than that. Select the white. And I think that's, yeah, that's about what we'll select. And then I can go to this one and click my darker blue. Remember, whenever you eyedropper a color by pressing I or using the eyedropper tool, it'll appear right here, this foreground color. If I press X or if I click this button, it switches them. So it's the same blue, just switched. Now I'm going to take the lighter blue down here. You see the difference in the color? Now I come back to my original document, my working document, and I can go to the paint bucket tool, hold down, find the gradient tool, come up here to the little menu, and you'll see the first option is a gradient based on the two colors I already have in my palette or my foreground background. So I can click that, and I can just, let's see, there we go. So there, that's the lighter on the bottom, darker on the top. Now the gradient in that photo looks a little more subtle, so I'm just gonna, when you're using the gradient tool, the one color will start where you click at the top, and then basically what you're doing is you're selecting the range of blending. So keep that in mind. So the less I select, oops, what did I just do? The less I select, the tighter the blend will be. Because I'm trying to tell it how much I want it to blend. So if I want it to be really blended, it's just like drag it all the way down. If I want it to be a little more subtle. And we know that the lightest blue is going to be right here touching the building, and the darkest blue is going to be right at the top. So I really want my gradient to go from the top, which is the darkest blue, to right here, which would be the lightest. That's pretty close. And I can add new layer with the same selection and just type in clouds. And if you have my brush pack that I sent y'all or that you downloaded, you can select this brush. It's 173. It's pretty close to the top. If you just scroll down a little bit, 173. And when I'm doing this menu, I'm pulling up, I'm right clicking or I'm control clicking with the brush tool activated. And that's the cloud brush. And I can just select white, switch back, and create a cloud. The only problem is it's like going to be super realistic looking compared to the rest of your drawing, because I think this cloud brush is, I think this one is made from like a photo of a cloud. It might not be, but you know, I can kind of get.
What tool rotates it over?
It's already added in. That rotation is already added in.
Stroke it changes.
Yeah, that's the default setting for it.
And how are you making that setting?
How do I make it?
If you wanted to manipulate a different brush.
So if you want to manipulate that, you go to Shape Dynamics, because we're changing the shape, and there's angle jitter. So it's going to change the angle of my brush 16% of the time, kind of like randomly. Oh, okay. This was for him. Anyway, so the thing I was going to tell him, Barrett, you're going to watch this later, I guess. I wouldn't use the cloud tool in this case just because it looks too real. Like nothing else looks this real. So, you know, it kind of doesn't make sense to use the cloud tool, the cloud brush. But just for the sake of showing y'all, this is what, you know, this is what you can add it in. Oh my God, this system is just erase it a little bit more. There we go. Get some general idea of how it's. Let's change this. I'm changing this layer to screen, and then I'm switching the background color with black, because black will not show up on the screen mode. So I can keep the cloud brush turned on, and I can erase with it. So it kind of gives me a better eraser. What I was saying, Barrett, was that I wouldn't, if you want to have a traditional look, I wouldn't use the cloud brush because it looks too real. And so your clouds are going to look really real. Your clouds are going to look very real, and then your building is going to look like a drawing. And it's going to be kind of like which one's which. Like, do you want your building to look more real, or do you want your background to look more real? The building should stand out, right? So you don't want the background to look too rendered. So another option would be to, let me just delete that layer entirely by pressing delete. And then same with the sky. Let me just, what is it, command or control click? I think it's control for PC. If you control click, it'll select all the pixels on the layer. If you don't, or you could just say, you could right click here and it'll where is it? If I right click the icon right here, select pixels. So it's going to select everything that's in there. I'll delete that sky, because if you want it to look kind of like you've been drawing so far, you should actually use the same brush or a similar brush, right? It keeps doing that. There we go. And then I want to take the same light blue color, and you want to manually do it to kind of give it the same feeling, you know, or the same style throughout the whole image. So you would manually come in here and just shade it in the way you would, like, you know, you're coloring in a coloring book or something, or if you're doing a watercolor. If you're actually doing a watercolor, remember you have to do that gradient yourself with the paintbrush. So this is going to be very similar. Let's go a little faster. Take the color below.
That's the difficult thing with me is that it really isn't. It's not. You can't pull a wash texture down, or you can run a gradient, but you can't kind of do them both at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it depends on the brush you have. So like the certain brushes will have a texture in them, and the gradation is created like what I'm doing. I'm just blending it by the pin pressure is activated, or not the pin pressure, but it's slightly transparent. So if I pick this mid-tone and just go over it lightly, it's going to create a subtle change. I come to the top, and just every time I go down, I'm pressing lighter and lighter with the pin. Lighter and lighter still. I could select this mid-tone if that one's standing out too much and blend it more. If I want to, I can use the smudge tool. And the smudge tool works best for blending. These are new sets of brushes that you haven't seen yet, because I made these the other week when y'all weren't in class. This brush, what it does is it stamps out kind of like this, like zigzags randomly. So it creates like as if you had like charcoal on paper and you took your fingers and like kind of like patted it and like smoothed it out like that. That's just what it's doing. It's creating that effect. So I can run it. See, the smudge tool also, it picks up stuff below on the very bottom layer. But it's set, the strength is set to 8%, so it's a very subtle blending. It's a very subtle blending. And then let me show you my settings in a second. It's freezing up on me. That would be another way to blend it some more, but it'll still have like a texture to it. It'll still have like a slight, it won't be perfectly smoothed out. Let me just wait for that to, y'all can't see it, but it's still processing the smudge. There, see, it's appearing right now. The smudge tool taxes your system a lot, so if your system isn't up to or like ready to do this kind of work, it'll slow down like this, even if you're not like, it's slowing down more so because I'm running this recording right now. Let's see. As soon as that stops. But it's real subtle. So 8%, it's basically going through and smearing the colors together very lightly, slightly randomly, but it kind of follows the pin path that I use. Let's see if this is done. Not quite. There we go. Okay. Nope. It's catching up. Okay. All right. So anyway, I'm not going to do that again just because it's way too slow. But come in here and do the brush strokes yourself with the brush tool. I'm going to deselect that now. The other thing you can do is you kind of add in a new layer, and we just call this gradient. And we'll take this blue right here in the mid-tone and press G, and it's going to automatically take me back to my gradient tool. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to select the second gradient right here in the preset. So you'll notice it's the blue color with the checkerboard, which means it's going from blue to transparent. Go OK. And I'm just going to run it across the whole image. Blue to transparent, and I can just slip this to soft light. And it's going to kind of tint the whole image a little bit, and I'm just going to lower the fill down to. Fill or opacity, either one's the same. Lower it down to about 20%. So it's a subtle, basically I'm creating an atmosphere that's going to subtly affect the building. Well, that's how you would do this, you know? I mean, you keep adding things onto it, and you want to go back, like, the shadows here have a variation to them. So one thing you might even want to do is just go to your shadow layer, the sides, select that color, and you can go to your brush tool and you could just select color dynamics, and you can tell it to jitter the hue, which means it'll slightly jitter between the colors a bit, and jitter the saturation, and you can even jitter the brightness just a little bit. It's like really subtle, 2%, 7%, 3%. And then you can come back and you can kind of see it changing. You'll see it more right here. Now if I zoom in, you see the variation that it's creating. Each time I stamp it down, it's like a different color slightly. I could switch this color, this white on the background, I could switch that with a slightly different green. So I could take this and then make it a little more green like that. And you can go back to the color dynamics. You gotta have your brush selected. And you can tell it to foreground, background jitter. I could tell it to just jitter between these two colors, and I'll turn off all these. Turn this down to, I guess 0. Apply per tip. I don't want it to apply per tip. So. This colors are so similar, it's really hard to even see. But let's just pretend we had this one. I guess it's just really subtle. Did I turn it off? Let's boost it up a bit. Maybe it's not showing up. Maybe that setting is too subtle. But you could add the variation in the brush itself. Just erase that out. You come in here and get these really tight and clean, or you use a lasso tool to come in and get it clean. And then select this, and I can come in here and shade certain parts that should have shadow. I think this thing comes off the building, right? Looks like it does. I can shade that a bit. Anything that sticks off will need a bit of that shadow. Oh, I switched to my pencil for some reason. Brush. The difference between the pencil and the brush is the pencil tool only works at 100% opacity. And I'll show you that in a second, I guess, because I haven't really talked about that at all. There should be shadow here, underneath that ledge, underneath that ledge. This is all sticking off, so this would all have shadow. There'd be a little shadow here. The inside. You know, anywhere in that same direction. And you've done the watercolor studies out in the open, so you know what I'm talking about, Barrett. This is a matter of applying what you've seen. Alright, so that's where you'd start it and you'd take it to finish. And if your drawing is more finished too, maybe we should have selected the other one actually, but where's your other class? ATX Car Condo. Yeah, that's a good file. That 5,000, like this one you could probably just work in directly. You don't need to adjust the size. This 5,000 pixels is pretty big. This, just go in here and like I wouldn't worry about cleaning up the paper too much. Like that texture is like the paper texture. I would leave it in just because that's the benefit of you drawing it and putting it into the computer is that you get that look of the real paper. Otherwise, you should draw the whole thing in Photoshop with a pencil tool. And like on this one, the paper texture wasn't so obvious, so you can come in here at the very end and create a new layer. I'm gonna drag it all the way to the bottom. Let's organize some of the stuff a bit. Make a new folder. Call this colors. We'll just put everything in the new folder. Everything with that new layer. Close. So now I can turn off all the colors, turn them back on. If we need to look at, if someone says like, what does this look like, you know, whatever, and you change it. Lines on and off. This is where you could find, if you go online, you could find a paper texture. I have some already here, so I'm just going to load one. I go to File, Place, and I have all my images in a folder here under Reference Images, Paper, and Inches. There's actually, I think that's armor. Okay. I don't want it to look too much. Just something subtle, like this vignette. Place. Okay, and I'm just gonna drag the thing to cover the whole. I don't need it to be exactly the same. So now it's gonna kind of look like you did it on a manila paper if you wanted that. If you don't want it to look so manila, you can come up here and let's see, hue saturation, and you can just turn down the saturation a bit. It's gonna take away that color. So it's kind of got this gradation now. You might want to keep a little bit of the color. The darks all the way, right? You know, that looks terrible, but
The one time I've done paper texture before, I just had found some rough tooth watercolor paper and then scanned it and actually took it black and white. So
that's what I was gonna tell you is the best way to do it is just scan your own, right? And like same thing if you ever need to do like if you ever need to do splatters for some reason, like for whatever reason you need to like do splatters or grunge, it's great to take a few hours out of a day and just make some marks on paper and scratch it up on like a sidewalk, or take a rock and scratch the paper and rip it a bit maybe, or even if you need to do like a grungy font, write something out in paper, print it out, take the actual paper and actually scratch it up with sandpaper or rock and actually grunge the font and then scan it back in, and you have like a custom like grunge font, you know, whatever. It's just a little thing extra that you can do that other people won't do. And like the same thing with like if there's a specific kind of paper texture you're looking for, just go out and buy it from like the art store and just scan it yourself, but scan it at a high resolution. Scan it like 600 DPI. That way, no matter what size you're working at, you'll always be able to use it, right? And you might need to, like, depending on how big your scanner is, you might need to make sure you buy the right size paper. I'm going to go ahead and stop this video, and we'll start up another one. We'll just call this Appy. Save. So all that file's saved. But for what we were talking about, though, you'd want to just make sure everything's separate and easily accessible for alterations, and there's certain fundamentals that you'll need to keep in mind, like the sky and the shadows and reflected light. So reflected light meaning like any kind of corner of the building is always going to bounce light from one side to the other side, and you've seen it if you've done your watercolor studies. But anyone else that we don't know what I'm talking about, there's this building here. Let me just make a new layer on top. This area of the building here, the front will reflect this color onto this side just a little bit. Just a little bit, like tiny, right? Not the full thing, just subtly. You might not even see it really in the photo, but if you were there in real life, you would see that it's lighter. The photograph's never going to capture everything your eye can see. Not for another few years.
One last question. Some of the big boys in the traditional watercolor thing, I do think it's somewhere between like atmospheric perspective and then just emphasizing, how do you say it, plane shift or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
in the geometry of the building. They will use typically like contrasting glazing over the, like for instance, the front walls are this tan, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they're turning into a, up against this red roof. Well, sometimes they'll articulate that change in plane by putting like a tint. This is the analog technique, but you'll pull a wash up and then
Yeah.
add a little bit of green just at the very top of the. You follow me? I guess you would just kind of do it over the top. Right?
At the very top of the building. Is that what
Well,
you're talking about?
It's a, I guess in computer terms, like gradient sort of thing. But, they'll slowly.
Were you saying they'd pull it from the
Like,
bottom
for
to the
instance,
top?
in that wall there,
Yeah.
from grass to roof,
Yeah.
they would go from like if they were wanting to emphasize the change from the grass to the wall.
Yeah.
They would have some sort of the contrasting color of the grass, like some sort of faint red. This is
Yeah.
just a tint of it. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not the color of the wall. It's just added to the wash. And then as they go up the wall, you stay in that tan or whatever it is, but then they'll tint out to a green or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
Changing planes there, and they want to
They would add just like
re-emphasize that with the color.
you could take a new layer and take maybe a red. If this watercolor set, all the reds are the same red unless you have two different reds in your set. And then you would here. I mean, crap. You're saying they would add a little red down here?
Right, but they wouldn't call it gradient, but in this speak, it's kind of what it would be. You'd start out with as much red as they would have would be just there at the grass
Yeah.
to emphasize the contrast. You follow me? It's like
Yeah.
a visual technique.
Yeah, because you're putting the
And then they'll wash through just ever so subtle.
Yeah.
And then washing what do you call it? Either glaze or washing it.
well, you have an option to just glaze it and set it to overlay, and it's going to overlay a little bit of a warm color down here.
There you go.
And that's like, it's going to be even more subtle than what the watercolor could do, because it's going to blend it on a level that
What was that?
they're just set to overlay blend mode here.
That's the layer setting?
Yeah. I mean, you could keep it a normal. Oops, not dissolve. Remember, dissolve does, it's either there or not there. There's no in between. So you could set to normal and just turn it down. It's like 30%, and it's going to kind of give you the same effect. You could even do it with multiply. Multiply will do the same. See, it's kind of a little bit of red down there. The only thing is that multiply is darkening it also. But that's how it does it with watercolor. If you were to wash red over colors already placed down, it's going to darken it. It's just slightly, you know. Come in here and it's a matter of, like, you've gone to workshops where they teach you how to do traditional watercolors. So you would take all the knowledge, like what you just told me, and apply it digitally. So just make a new layer, and you'd call it your like planar contrast layer. Take it right at the end and just glaze over the little areas where you want it. And if you want it to be super fast too, I mean, like I said before, you just lasso all these planes and then just use your gradient. You know, and then you can erase it back. If it's too much, you can erase it out a little bit. And then the benefit is that you can you can delete everything in the layer and start over if you need to, and they can't. Like if they mess up while they're in the middle of it, they're like, oh, well, they're going to start over kind of thing. That would be the benefit you're giving yourself, that you can just go back and undo. Come in here. You can even put it pretty dark. And my eraser is this brush here. My eraser is this really soft brush at the top. It's the second brush in the brush pack, but it's also more like a default Photoshop brush. So I can softly erase it, you know. So it gives me a gradual gradation. I can add that to everything here if I want. And the other thing you could do, if in the end the green's like, you know, super green, you don't want it to be so green. You can either use a filter or you can just add a new layer, put in this white color. On top of this new layer, or you can go. Remember, we had everything separate, so you could go down to the grass layer and just kind of, do an adjustment layer. You could always add on top and just set the color, and it's going to tone down. It's toning down the green because I selected white, so the white will always. It's going to take out the color. It's going to desaturate it. And I can adjust it with my opacity here, but it's the same thing if I were to go down and just. If I went to my colors and say I said, oh, the grass is too distracting, I could take the grass layer and just go, okay, hang on, turn it down a bit if the grass is too distracting. Or if that's not enough, you can go in here and adjust it, brightness and contrast, and say, tone down the contrast, tone down the brightness, we'll tone up the brightness maybe a little bit. That'd be too much. Anyway, let me save that and close it. Let me stop this video so that it doesn't crash my computer. And we'll go on and do another. We'll go on to another little demo. You just need to apply.